line to show if there is a strong positive or negative relationship. So the way to add this in Tableau is you'll go to the left-hand side and click on Analytics to open up the graph and help my audience understand what it means when a product lies in a particular quadrant. So I'm going to create 2 reference lines in order to make these 4 squares on the scatter plot. And the reason I'm doing that is because you can actually divide up these 4 spaces and indicate in the bottom left-hand corner means if a dot or a product falls in this region, it means it has low sales and low profit. And if it falls in the top left-hand corner, it means the product here has low sales and high profit. And if it's at the top right, it means this product has high sales and high profit. And then the bottom right means high sales and low profit. And if you're dealing with negative values for profit, it means there's a loss. So that could be some interesting thing for your audience. It can affect how they make their decisions about keeping certain products or maybe trying to sell them more or thinking about discounts, that kind of stuff. So some of the business questions you can answer with this is, for instance, which products are we not selling as much and not making much profit from either? Like we're possibly even seeing a loss. And which products are we not selling as much, but they're still very profitable? Maybe this is interesting for someone to make a decision about, hey, we don't have to sell much of this, but we can make a lot of profit. We definitely want to keep selling this. In the top right-hand corner, which products are we selling a lot of and making a profit? And finally, which products are we selling a lot of, but we're not making much profit from, or we're seeing a loss from? Maybe we want to discontinue it. So this can really help your audience understand the scatter plot better, especially if they're not familiar with seeing this kind of chart. This will help them. If we add reference lines, it can really make their lives easier in terms of interpreting this chart. So KH is asking, what's the purpose of trend line? Is this where most products are between profit and sales? So that's a good question. A trend line, depending on the type of trend line, we made a very basic linear one. It can tell you things about trends, or in this case, because it's a scatter plot, a relationship between these 2 variables. So it would actually, in this case, if we had a strong relationship between sales and profit, then the trend line would indicate either it's a positive trend, meaning more sales means more profit, or a negative trend. But in this case, the trend wasn't very strong, so I don't think a trend line would be really helpful for our audience. And so I decided I'm going to do these other types of reference lines. I hope that makes sense. All right, so we're going to go back to Tableau, and we're going to move this trend line. And so again, we want to make these quadrants on the scatter plot so that our audience can understand how to interpret where our product lies. So we're going to right click. If you see there's axes, we're going to right click on the sales axis and then click on edit axis, and then click on add reference line. And this window should pop up. Are you able to see the window that popped up on my screen? If not, I'm going to reshare. It looks like you can't. The sales axis and click on add reference line. All right, now you should see my window. And we are going to, by default, it's going to add a reference line that is the average of sales. We're going to keep that as default for now. And then it's also going to ask me for formatting for the line. I'm going to change it to an orange color just so it pops and matches what I had in the slides, and click OK. I'm going to do the same with profit. I'm going to right click on the profit axis, add a reference line, and only change the line formatting to orange. And I'll show you how you can change the other values in other exercises. So there you go. You have made 4 areas. It doesn't look evenly spread out because we're using the average of the sales and profit to create these regions. And you've added them to the chart. And what you can do is that what I like to do is if I'm adding reference lines in order to create these quadrants, you can right click in any area in the quadrant and actually annotate directly. And you can write whatever you want in here. You can write the business question that we had, or you can actually write what that area represents. So in this case, the top right-hand corner represents high sales and high profit. It's really up to you and what you think is going to be helpful for your audience to annotate, but I'm not going to go into annotation much. Just know that you have the option and you can format this the way you like it. So that's how you can add a reference line to a scatter plot, but you can actually add a reference line to any chart, not just a scatter plot. Which products are performing well in terms of sales for their category? So we can actually use this we can actually use reference lines to visualize this as well, to help show which products are performing well in terms of sales for their category. So I'm going to rename this sheet scatter plot and create a new sheet. And you can create a new sheet in Tableau by clicking on this icon at the bottom. So we've created a new sheet. And we're going to add add sales to columns again. And then this time for rows, we're going to add category and subcategory. So by double clicking it, it's added to the rows. So this is how my bar chart looks right now. It's showing the sum of sales for each subcategory. But the question is, which products are performing well in terms of sales for their category? So we can actually add a reference line here to help figure out which products are performing well. And for this example, we're just gonna say like which products are performing above average for their category. So the way to do that is we are going to go to the analytics pane again on the left-hand side. Go down to custom and you'll see an option for reference line. We're going to click on reference line and drag it over to our workspace. And it's going to give us an option to add a reference line to the table, pane, or cell. I'm going to go to pane and I'll show you why. I'm going to go ahead and drop it in the pane. And it's okay if you accidentally put the scope somewhere else because you can, in this pop-up window, it's going to let you choose the scope. So we're going to keep the scope to pane. And then for the line, the reference line, we're going to also keep it to be the average of sales. And we're going to change the formatting to be orange, just so it's easier to see. Click OK. And now you'll see that there are 3 reference lines. And it made a reference line for each pane, which represents each category. So now you're able to see which of the bars for each category was above average compared to this reference line. So basically, wherever it passes the reference line, that subcategory product actually had above average sales compared to its category. So this can help your audience answer these kinds of questions. They have an actual reference line that can help them really visualize and see which bars are below this reference line and which ones are above this reference line. You can customize this too. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the reference line, any one of them, and click edit, and I'm going to show you something cool. So one thing is, right now we've been looking at a reference line calculated on average. You can actually change this to any value. You can use a minimum, maximum, median, the sum, or the total. And the cool thing I like is you can also use a constant value. So for instance, maybe your audience members, they want to see which products surpassed a very specific sales goal they have in mind for that quarter. Let's say that sales goal is $100,000. So they want to figure out which of these products surpassed the sales goal of $100,000. So you can do that by clicking on constant. If you select constant, and you're able to actually adjust the value to be whatever number you want. So in this case, our sales goal is 100,000. So I'm going to add 100,000. And for label, I'm actually going to do custom. and call it sales goal. And I'm going to make the scope the entire table because the sales goal applies to all products. So this is how it's going to look. I'm going to select entire table, choose a constant value of $100,000. I'm going to label it sales goal. I'm going to keep the color orange and click OK. And now you have this single reference line that represents your sales goal, and you can see which bars exceeded that sales goal. So it helps your audience member figure out which ones surpass the sales goal and which one maybe is getting close and which ones are way below the sales goal. So this is how reference lines can really help your audience understand the data that they're looking at. And I know some people, they may actually just not have a reference line and just have that 100,000 in their mind and kind of see where the bars are above 100,000. But this is such an easy way. Tableau makes it so easy to add reference lines. So I really recommend that you play around with this and see where you can add this to make the lives of your audience a lot easier. Reference lines, but also something called reference bands. So I'm going to show you how you can make that because maybe reference bands will help you visualize what you need to show your audience members better than a single line. So I'm going to first click on this reference line and remove it. And we're going to look at the left-hand side, and you'll see that in the analytics pane below reference line, there's an option for reference band. I'm going to show you what that looks like because this might be something that you're interested in making instead. So if you click on reference band and you try to drag it to your workspace, again, it's going to give you an option to put it in the table or the pane. I'm going to select table. And it'll show this window that looks very familiar. But in this case, it's asking you the range that you want the band to be from. So I'm going to have it range from the average sales to the maximum. And the fill be this light orange color, peach color. Click OK. And it's created this reference band on the chart. So this might be more helpful if you really like, you'll notice that compared to that reference line, this really catches your eye, right? It's the color, orange color. It's colored differently from the rest of the chart. So this really draws your audience members' attention to this region. So if that's the goal for your chart, to really focus their attention on a particular region, then consider using a reference band. And that will highlight these bars or whatever type of chart you're visualizing, the values that fall within this highlighted region. So this is another option. Our reference lines are a little bit more subtle, but so I think this can be more powerful in making sure that your audience members' attention goes to this area. So again, it's so easy to make this on Tableau. If you're really interested in learning more about reference lines, I'm going to go ahead and drop a link in the chat. And this is Tableau's way to actually make it during the exercise, or you can make it along with me if you want. So as I mentioned, a bullet chart is a bar chart with a reference line or point, and it can be very useful when trying to compare to another point. So for instance, we've been looking at sales and profits data for products. So if you were showing this, so let me show you, let's make a quick bar chart right now. I'm going to, actually we can even look at the bar chart we just made. But if you're, let's say the manager you're presenting to, or whoever your audience is, they're curious about how this year's profit for each product subcategory, how did this year's profit compare to last year's profit? So that's the business question we're going to answer using a bar chart. So what I'm going to do in a new sheet, I'm going to first verify what years we have in our data set. So I'm going to double click on order date, and I'm just going to see what years are present in my data set. So I have 2022 as the current year and 2021 is the previous year. And your data set should also look the same. So I'm going to use 2022 as the current year and compare the profit for 2022, whatever we've seen so far this year, to last year's profit. I'm going to go ahead and remove order date because I just wanted to confirm the years. And what I'll do is right now, if I were to look at profit data right now on Tableau, it's going to show me the profit for all years. I only care about this year and last year. That's what my audience member cares about in seeing this chart, is they want to compare this year's profit to last year's. So I can create a new calculated field in Tableau very easily. And the way to do that is, if you're following my mouse, on the left-hand side, you'll see this small black arrow that's pointing downwards. I'm going to click on that. And it's going to give me, the first option will give me that menu is Create Calculated Field. And it's going to ask me the name of the calculation. I'm going to name this 2022 profit. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so you can see. And it's going to be a very simple calculation. There are trainings and classes just dedicated to how to make calculated fields. So for all the demos, you can just copy what you see on the screen. And if you're interested in learning more, I recommend taking those courses. We're going to do, in this calculation, we're going to say if the year or order date is equal to 2022, and grab the profit. And then end. This is how you can copy, and it's okay if you cannot follow along right now, because I will have this calculation in the activities sheet, so you can copy and paste it from there. But this is how we're going to create the calculated field to get the profit for 2022 only. I'm going to click OK. And now we're going to drag and drop 2022 profit into columns. And then I'm going to take subcategory, because the question was at the subcategory level, and drag and drop that into rows. And it'll create this bar chart for me. It's showing me the 2022 profit at the subcategory level for each of these subcategories. And you can see the 0 line is right here in the middle, sort of in the middle. And you can see that there were some subcategories that had negative profit, meaning it had a loss. All right, now, so the question that your audience cares about is, how did this year's profit for 2022 compare to last year's? And we're going to use a reference line to add in the 2021 profit. And it's gonna look really cool, because usually people create a double bar chart, but this is going to be way more space efficient, and I just think it looks a lot better. So we're going to create a second calculated field that's going to look very similar. So again, we're going to click this down pointing arrow on the left-hand side, create a calculated field, and call this 2021 profit. It's going to look exactly the same. The only thing that's going to change is the year. We're going to say if the year or order date is 2021, then grab the profit for that and end. It's going to look exactly the same, just we're changing the year to 2021. And we're going to call this 2021 profit and click OK. But this time, we're going to drag and drop 2021 profit to the detail marks card. So you see where I'm hovering over details mark card? Drop it there. You're not going to see anything yet. Now, we're going to go to the analytics pane, like we did last time when we were creating a reference line. And we are just going to grab the reference line under custom and start heading over to our workspace. And this time we're going to select the cell as the scope. So you see it's getting highlighted because I'm hovering over it. I'm going to drop it in cell. It's going to open up this new window. So the scope is going to be per cell. And I'll show you what that means. And for the line value, we're going to change this to the sum of 2021 profit. That's what we want the reference line to show, the 2021 profit. And we're going to change it from average to sum. So this is how it's going to look. The sum of 2021 profit at the per cell level scope. I'm going to change the formatting to orange. I'm going to make it a little bit thicker just so you can see better. This is really up to you, your preference. And then click OK. And now you're going to see a reference line for each bar. So that's what we meant by per cell. For each bar, you're going to see a reference line. And that reference line represents last year's profit for that product. So now you can see for each product subcategory, which of the bars exceeded its reference line. Which ones exceeded this year's profit compared to last year's? So now you can see in the same cell, your audience member can compare the profit. And what people usually do is that they'll create a double bar chart instead, where they'll have like one bar that represents, this year's profit, one color, and then a second bar right next to it that represents last year's profit in a different color. And so that can make your bar chart look a lot bigger. And I just personally think it's a lot easier to compare the values if they're all in the same cell, because you can see which ones went above the bar, went above the line, and which ones are still under the line, which ones have not reached last year's or exceeded last year's profit. So this is a really easy way. And personally, I've seen when I present this to my audience members, they really love bullet charts. They really love how easy it is to compare. So that's how easy it is to make it on Tableau. It's not one of those default show me charts, but it's not that hard to make. So I'm going to do a pulse check and see, did you enjoy making this chart, own Sparkline chart? So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So the business use case we have now is that we want to be able to show the general trend for a lot of the measures we have in our data set in a small amount of space. I'm going to give you a different business use case for your activity. So it's going to look a little bit different. But for this exercise, we're going to actually look at measure names and measure values. So I'm going to move both of those to rows. I'm going to drag and drop measure names to rows. And then do the same for measure values. Drag and drop it to rows. It's going to look like this for now. And then I'm going to move order date to columns. And I'm going to click on the drop-down arrow for order date and select the month continuous, which is the option you see where it gives you an example, May 2015. I'm going to use that one because I want to see the trend on a monthly basis over time. And it's going to create this line chart for me. And I'm going to go ahead and remove some of the measures that I don't really care about in showing in the Sparkline. So remember, we created these custom values, these calculated fields for 2021 and 2022 profit. I'm going to remove those because I actually don't want to visualize these in Sparkline. So I'm going to right-click and say exclude for these. So right-click 2022 profit and exclude them. I'm also going to exclude count of orders and quantity. I think that also doesn't make sense to visualize in a Sparkline. So now I'm left with discount, profit, and sales. And let's see, I'm actually going to change the measure value for discount from sum to average. So if you click on the pill you see in the measure values card, for discount, click on the drop-down arrow and go down to measure and change this to average. All right, so this still isn't a Sparkline yet, but we're almost there. What we're going to do next is I'm going to actually, I want to be able to see the variation in the average discount more. So I'm going to actually right-click the average discount axis and click on Edit Axis and unselect Include 0. And you'll see that when I do that, you can see more of the variation in the discount this way. So remember, the Sparkline takes up a lot less space. So I know it's going to be a lot smaller chart, and I want to be able to see the overall trend a lot better. All right, so next what we're going to do is we're going to, I'm going to make this take up a lot less space. And what I'll do is if you hover over on the right-hand side to the end of the chart, you'll see an option of these double arrows. if you click and drag, you're able to adjust the width of your charts. So I'm going to drag it to the left because the sparkline is going to take up a lot less space on the dashboard we're going to make at the end of this class. You can adjust it as you like it. I think this looks pretty good. We still have some cleanup to do. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is in this chart, in any white space in this chart, I'm going to right click and it will show me this drop down menu and I'm going to select format. When you do that on the left hand side, you'll see these formatting options for your chart. I work with this a lot because Tableau automatically formats the charts and I like to clean up my charts, and we're going to have a whole segment on how to clean this up. So I use this feature a lot. And what we're going to do is we're going to head over to, you're going to see these icons at the top in the format pane, and I'm going to select the one that shows these variation lines. This icon, I'm going to click on that. And I am going to start with columns and just remove some of these lines just so it's cleaner, because we saw in the example from Edward Tufte, there were no lines. I'm going to do the same with rows. Remove the grid lines, remove the zero lines. And then I'm going to go to this icon for borders. It's going to look like a table. We're going to go down to, in the row section, to the row divider where it says pane. I'm going to select none. And I'll do the same for columns. Go down to column divider, pane, none. So now it's given me this really clean chart where there are no lines. The other thing you'll notice is that the spark lines that I showed you, the examples I showed you, they didn't have any labeled axes. Again, we're just trying to show overall trends. These are going to take up a small amount of space. So you can right click each axis and you'll see an option where it says show header. And I'm going to unselect that so it makes the axis disappear. So now I'm going to do this with the Y axis. Right click it and unselect show header. So now all that you're left with is the measure name and its corresponding spark line. So it's made 3 spark lines. And in the activity we'll do later on, we're going to be making spark lines to show overall trends in profit. And I'll show you how to add that to the dashboard. And it's going to be like the small area in the dashboard where you'll see these spark line charts. Right now it looks pretty big because this is the whole dedicated worksheet for spark lines. But when we add them to the dashboard, you can see how space saving it can be. The other thing I actually want to point out is that now, we have these spark lines, right? There's actually a category of charts called spark charts. And so they can be anything. They don't have to be lines. They can be bar charts, pie charts. That's what you'll usually see. And you'll usually see them embedded within tables. So I think you might have seen them before. But now you have not just spark lines, but spark charts. And again, the point is that they just take up a lot less space. So that's why some people embed them within tables. And I know generally, at the beginning of this class, we talked about how tables aren't the best way to visualize data. But if your hand is forced to make a table, if someone tells you, I really want a table, your audience member says, I really want a table to see this data, you can kind of sneak in a visualization by adding in a spark chart, like a bar chart, a small bar chart within the table. And that's how you can sneak in a visualization for your target audience. It's kind of like sneaking in spinach and smoothies for your kids. So you kind of get them hooked onto data visualizations that way. Any questions so far? All right, so Kate is asking, is there a way to clear all fields without dragging each one by one? I believe so. I haven't tried. I think if you go to, you still have to do it by columns and rows. So the way, if you want to create a blank chart, if you want to remove all these fields that you have put in here, the question is how to do it without individually removing every single pill, is that if you go to the columns, you'll see a drop down arrow and you can say clear shelf. And you can do the same with rows. drop down clear shelf. All right. So the next thing we're going to visualize are geographic data. So let me know if you've ever made a map before. If you haven't, we're going to make our first map in Tableau. And before we do that, I'm going to give you guys a 5-minute break before we move on.